All right, guys, thanks for jumping in on the live stream today. Of course, Bitcoin moving its way into 25K. We're going to talk about that and maybe some of the reasoning by where the market is trending, because this is something that I think a lot of people are still scratching their head about because of the mixed signals that the market is delivering. We'll get into that for you. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. I want to thank our sponsor today, and that is Kraken. If you're looking at maybe trying a new exchange, maybe trying to lower your trade fees, and you need a whole bunch of cryptocurrencies and across the world, no matter whether you're listening to us from London, our #1 city out there, hey, the guys in the UK, or if you're all the way down in South America, Sao Paulo, this is the spot for you. Check out Kraken. Make sure and use our link. It does help the channel out. You can do a ton over there on Kraken. Let's get into it today. And part of this day is marking the 25K point. And now this has been a psychological area that I think a lot of traders have really looked at as being, you know, what would happen if Bitcoin breaks and holds 25K? Now it's still sketchy as to whether or not it does hold. And if you guys have been following me on Twitter and you look at our sentiment data, you're tracking the CPI, you're over on our Substack, you already know these things. You were in quite a bit earlier, all the way back down to 16.9 and maybe even on the 21.5 just earlier in the week. I think the key here right now are a couple of things. One is the continued narrative that we're going to be getting from the macro side of things. And this is something that we just had Dr. Jeff Ross on yesterday talking about this very issue. And he and I both, you know, even though I don't like agreeing with people all the time on the show, I want to kind of give a contrarian position. I still agree with him is that there, for the time being, it's still a bullish signal. But there are some potential scenarios that could play this out. A couple of things here on this article. Largest cryptocurrency by market cap, you already know, obviously hitting the 25 mark. 25,256 on Coinbase was the number. And then, of course, we've retraced slightly, but really kind of bouncing off of that. And I think the key here is that we are in a very interesting spot right now. And that is that maybe the industry finally has had enough of the bad news. And when I say the industry has had enough, it means that we've washed out all the bad actors. Now, there's still always going to be a handful, but maybe we've cleared the way for most of the bad actors to be affecting the market. And we're back to building, we're back to growing. And the good thing is that we don't necessarily have a market pressure that is extreme. Instead, we've got these mixed signals coming into us from everything from inflation to jobs to etc. And what tells me that is things like this tweet right here, and this coming in from Jim Cramer. And I don't like this at all, because when Jim says it's a bull market, even though occasionally he actually gets it, but for the most time when I look at tech or things around this, but he's looking primarily at the S&P, he's looking at this going up. And I think as we see the scenarios playing out within the Fed and the FOMC, they may be right. Now, there are some things happening on Bitcoin that a lot of people are talking about right now. One thing is the Bitcoin Taproot adoption. Remember, this was only up around 4% not too long ago. This was February 8th from Will Clemente. Bitcoin Taproot adoption breached 5% first time ever. And then you see this spike right here just a week later at 13%. Is this something to worry about? I don't know that this is a major factor when you look at where Bitcoin is today. As we continue to mature with Bitcoin, along with what's happening with Bitcoin and this whole ordinal scenario, could be playing into some pressures onto Bitcoin in the future. We're probably going to do a big video on this. I'd love to get some, some polarizing thoughts on this, because I know we have some guys that are truly Bitcoiners, and then some people that do think sidechains are an option with Bitcoin. And I think there's some things that you should look at that. But this is something that you should be aware of and do your own research, because if you're investing in Bitcoin on the long term, you need to be aware of all things that are happening within that ecosystem. So just pay attention out there for sure. Bitcoin bulls aim to hold this week's Bitcoin gains leading into Friday's 675 million options expiry. This is a big deal because it does get into a lot of what we've seen over the last maybe the last month or so, is people shorting. And the unintended consequences right now is heightened government debt costs. This is a problem we've talked about before with Mark Yusko. He and I had this conversation. And creating a bullish environment for scarce assets such as commodities, stock market, and cryptocurrencies. These are the kind of scenarios that will play out into this. Bears were not expecting a 22K level, and we went right past it, and of course are sitting at the 25K level. The 21.5 was an interesting position because that was one of the areas that had shown support, and when we traded into that, especially when we were looking at the sentiment, and even on my own Twitter over the weekend, everybody was kind of laughing at me, and I was saying, listen up guys, we're getting ready to coil up here. There's a lot of things happening with sentiment that is pointing in the right direction. Back to that point, so very hot right now. Love to get your input as to whether or not you think Bitcoin can make it back out to around the 27, 28. That is a new window. There is also a lot of blue water between here and 30K. A lot of things could happen. Not necessarily a lot of pressure, most likely a 25 basis points coming in from the Fed on the next meeting. And of course, if we continue to see the jobs scenario play out on this, maybe there's not enough there. The concern I have is always this double dip in inflation. This was a Pantera report on the 7th bull cycle. And they hit on a few things here. Let me jump over to a couple of highlights here. I want to jump into a couple of these for you guys. One of them is right here. DeFi finance should not be overlooked in this year's building of the CeFi. It'll be a powerful tool for obviously CeFi companies, and we think that's going to be one of the big scenarios that helps centralized finance maybe make their way into DeFi for the first time, is this evolution. NFTs, record sales, Web3 gaming exploding, Facebook rebranding Meta. We know all this. Entire world focused on crypto asset class with user acquisition. Never seen easier and inexpensive for software providers. So again, this is easy entry. It's what we talk about all the time, is Web3 to Web 2, that conversion. When that starts to really happen, it's still very early, so you're in at the right time. And then you look at the explosion, Web3 users. Companies need to quickly develop more robust backend, security, HR, all that stuff. Solution on most of these gaps in company robustness has been and will continue to be software. That most likely will transition into blockchain and where Web3 is going. So further in the report, a couple of things. Empowering gamers using in-game. That's the argument we've been talking about for quite some time. Also, if you think about just the peak of where Axie was generating north of 10 million in daily marketplace fees, imagine what that would do in the next cycle as we start to see liquidity back into the market. This is another factor that Jeff and I talked about yesterday. If you missed that video, go back and check our most recent video yesterday. So, because it was a full deep dive, it was our live show with Jeff Ross over at Velshars Capital. And we got into that. Liquidity is the scenario, and what I mean by that is all this cash that's been on the sidelines, a lot more is being deployed now, which is what you're seeing right now in the open market. So further into this, several hundred well-funded indie studios, often founded by veterans and free-to-play gaming industry, experimenting blockchain gaming. So we're going to continue to see growth there. Tectonic shift on how marketing distribution occurs. Traditional studios, and we trend to see more in 2023. Going to happen. So they're really liking where this Web3 scenario plays out. Remember that, and there was a lot of good charts in this. You can kind of see just where we've seen blockchain gaming deals. Obviously, it's slowed, but what we'll see most likely is that pickup for 23. But the point being is that with the market as where it is right now, ETH now trading over 1,700, and if you look at just ultrasound money and the deflationary aspect, we are way below that, and there are some scenarios that are playing out in that. We're probably going to do a full video on this whole situation with OpenSea and what's happening with Blur, and we won't go into today, but there is some big news happening there that could cause a lot of activity on the ETH front, which again gets back into adoption and starts to push adoption back into the main core asset, which is Bitcoin. So a lot happening there. ETH. Let's get into a couple of things here with ETH. Let me kind of jump up here to the top. Price could reach 1,800. Actually, I think this is a little bit underperforming. Let me zoom up on this for you. One of the most bullish arguments on ETH right now is the fact that most coins in the space are experiencing inflation. We know what the deflationary scenario is playing out right now on ETH heavily. A lot of that is being contributed to what's happening over on the NFT marketplace, Blur. So that in itself is a big one. Burn rate is also accelerated, coming out more than 4,000 ETH burned daily. Another one, many people think that's going to push it over the 1,800 range. The digital assets price is up 8.7 just in the last 24. And 3, percent on the last 7 days. So again, ETH continuing to climb overall. If you guys are not tracking our CPI, make sure and get in on that, because it is, I think, one of the best tools, especially in these kind of markets where sentiment starts to give us a little bit of a precursor to where things might be going. And it's still holding strong on both ETH and on Bitcoin. So make sure and check it out. We'll leave a link below to get into that. So many people are saying, well, where are the transactions coming from? And we've mentioned this before, but if you look at the Wall Street of Asia, part of that lies right in the largest Singapore bank. This all coming in from Hong Kong customers, etc. But they're applying for a license in Hong Kong to sell digital assets to Hong Kong customers. Interactive Brokers has now begun Bitcoin and ETH trading to professional investors in Hong Kong, which again gets back in this whole scenario that I've talked about before, and that is that Asia, Pacific Rim, could become one of the epicenters of where digital assets will grow from, especially if we continue to see more pressure from a regulatory environment here in the United States, because it will push a lot of traders offshore. But more importantly, the innovations that will eventually happen could happen outside the US. That's the thing I fear the most. Here was Luke Martin. New Bitcoin narrative brewing. Hong Kong is getting into crypto. What makes it even more interesting is the People's Bank of China is one of the only central banks in the world cutting rates and easing. This gets back into the big benefit of macro on a global level, because that's a pivot. If you think about a central bank and we see cutting rates, we haven't seen that with the Fed and Western banks, and especially with the EU banks. Same kind of scenario plays out on this. So pretty big deal. June 1st, 2023, Hong Kong will officially make crypto purchase and sell trading fully legal for all its citizens. Watch out, because June right there starts to fly into the time zone that we look at as a potential really brisk run for where crypto assets and risk assets may fly. Asian currency-based stablecoin coming out of HK, Hong Kong, will be a certainty as well. So again, this gets back into the scenario what we've seen with the SEC, Paxos BUSD, also playing into Tether's bag. All of this is aligning with some interesting scenarios. And again, it goes back to the point of, if we don't see the barricades on the markets, if we don't see the barricades on the geopolitical front, if we do get a softening of the Ukraine-Russian war, and if we get these energy problems behind us, which are now starting to ease simply because it's starting to come out of the winter months, things start to change in a lot of these Western fronts. And then the liquidity starts to move. And if the market pressures are not there, the next shoe to drop, of course, is market movement. So big deals. Let's go on to another couple topics here. Wait is over, ZK Sync. We've had the guys from Polygon talking about ZK and what Polygon has been able to do on the layer 2 side. But all aboard ZK Sync, the era, the mainnet. Now, today, Ethereum's first ZK EVM is opening its mainnet to builders, adopting new brand name, opening source into its entire code base. Again, this gets back into more growth on ETH and more growth in the overall market, because it, again, makes it easier for adoption, makes it easier for people to really kind of take it up a level, and really kind of that whole Web 2 to Web 3 component of the market starts to play into the future. By the way, we've got a good interview coming up at our 5 o'clock video that we're going to drop. It is a Ripple executive that came on our show today to talk about the growth of where not only XRPL was going, but also Ripple in general, the strategies and some of the things that are being played out. You don't want to miss that one. So it's coming up 5 o'clock. Put it on your watch list. It's going to hit. Fed's Mester says more rate hikes needed to combat inflation. This will be the only problem that could come back into scenario here. And that is if we see that double dip, meaning CPI doesn't, if we see a certain rise. And remember, with CPI, even if you look at core CPI all the way back to the 1980s, it didn't just go down, 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 down. It had little bumps in the road, some little clips here and there. So I'm not too worried if it goes up a point, 1/10 of a point. If it goes up maybe even 2/10 of a point. The point that I get at is that as long as the trend line is still continuing down, then this will be, I think, the narrative for the Fed. The one that concerns me still is credit and jobs. And those are the ones that are a little bit, just because the job numbers came in so hot. Those are the ones that could put a little bit of a kibosh on this turnaround. Here is the Kobisi letter talking about, you can't make this up, just 2 weeks ago, market futures were pricing in 1 rate hike and 2 rate cuts in 2023. Now markets beginning to price in the possibility of 4 rate hikes in 2023. And there is now a growing case for the Fed to raise rates to 6%. This is crazy because this would be the scenario that starts to play out into that slowing through 2023 and pushing us into a 2024 recovery. These are the kind of things you got to watch out for. And it goes back into what Jeff and I were talking about yesterday. We're trending up right now, potentially short term. All the indicators are pushing positive and bullish. But you have to be aware of what's happening in the market, and can some of these things start to slow this down in terms of economy if it gets overheated. Because remember, the economy has still been very, very bullish, for sure. All right, so we're going to get into some questions today. We'll take a look at a couple of other things we'll get into. And let's take a look at the poll real quick, and I'll probably give you guys some sentiment as well. All right, so is the Bitcoin party over? Yes, we'll crack back down. Oh, man, 50-50, 30K. Woo, man. Half of you are way out there on the edge, and half of you are hanging in there at 20K, under 25K. That'll be interesting. All right, so let's get into a couple. Naughty Jackal, from 16K to 25K is already fine. For sure. I mean, when you think about where we've been from just here recently, this year, we were at 16.2, I think, was its low. So that in itself is pretty significant. I was going to see if the data was updated here on Bitcoin. I think it is. We'll get into a couple more questions. Bitcoin up 50%. NASDAQ, how much? You know, NASDAQ has been sliding in and out, but again, remember, T-bills still showing strength, and we're up to almost 5% on T-bills right now. So I think there are some potentials there. If you look at those 60-40 portfolios out there, a lot of people are looking at T-bills and then going into these risk assets and obviously crypto plays into that. So we could be seeing some of that as well. Here's Bitcoin's sentiment. This is coming in here on the 16th, and you can kind of still see the driving force. This was back here on just the 9th when we saw that dip and then pop. It just has not really slowed much other than just that last little dip right here, but all on this trend line up and well performing over. Right now, still pointing in the up direction. So could we blast through 25K is the key. All right, so here we go. Zelaya says, I'm 40% cash. Any thoughts on Bitcoin could go down to 19K? I mean, we grabbed a bag here mainly because the last time it went to 24, we exited about 50% of a Bitcoin bag. We came back in at 21.5. This is not trading advice. This is what we've done. We do it through research and really kind of tracking what's happening within Bitcoin as a whole. And I don't know if we're going to see a 19K quickly. Now, there will have to be some impetus from the market to push it there, but that 21.5K could come back into zone. That's only if we start to see and we truly have hit maybe a level of resistance. But remember, that 25K was and is a psychological resistance level. Once we perform over 25K, people are going to start really thinking sentiment-wise, this is the new 21K. And when you have that, people will start doing what they always do, dollar cost averaging. Those are the things that do happen. And you get scenarios where liquidity comes back into the market and you get big players starting to go in. Whale moves. Russell says, where do you think the likes of Polygon and HBAR can go in the bull run? Polygon's still flying. Let me go to the charts real quick. Let me open up the charts real fast. Sorry, I didn't have that open. Sometimes I'll have these things open for you guys quickly. Can you imagine there was no YouTube and all I had was Jim Crater to listen to? No kidding, man. Thank you, Jen. All right, so ETH, you kind of see a little bit of we're still on the 4 hour right here, a little bit of red candle adjusting right now at the 24.8. Let's go over here and take a look at Matic. Still up and strong. Again, we sold our Matic. We got completely out of Matic, mainly because we believe in taking profits, and you guys know our position on that. is that sometimes we will sell before those highs. Sometimes we'll hold a little bit stronger on things, and usually it's on projects that I just believe in. Render is a good example of one. I've held Render too long sometimes, and I catch it on the backside and do an exit. But if you look at where Matic is holding right now, 7% on that. Things are correcting slightly this afternoon. And what else do we have here that was moving heavy? Not a lot from, oh yeah, Audius was up on almost 9. Okay, 9% right there on Audius. So big strike on that. Again, Audius was in our swing list, and we're definitely holding some of that one. So that's another one that is. Anyway, somebody check on Gareth. Gareth is, he's going to come on the show, and we're going to talk about this because this is one thing that was questionable as to whether or not we would see this for sure. Majid says, was wondering if you can advise on how come Gala price has gone up much considering the 25K. I think with Gala, again, not advice, but Gala's a show partner with us. The key here with Gala is all about how the markets are adjusting to the entertainment business. And anytime there's new news around music, gaming, etc. Remember, Gala just did a big deal this year on mobile. They got a pretty good pump on that news alone. Most of those kinds of projects move on press, and press is really kind of what drives it because they're very sentiment driven on that. So for sure. Most people miss the bottom waiting for it. Yes, for sure. Whenever Bitcoin is at least 70% off the highs, DCA from that point. That's a good one, Adam. Good point as well. So be watching this, guys. We are going to be looking at this very closely. We will keep you updated on all things Bitcoin, ETH, and of course, all the altcoins in Web3. Don't forget, we miss you too, Steve-O. Thanks for popping back in. Don't forget, guys, the 5 o'clock show, Ripple. You don't want to miss this one. It's going to be a good one. All right, don't forget, also get into the Diamond Circle. It's easy, it's free, and our new Substack is just pbn3.substack. You'll find it over there. We drop a new podcast over there along with additional content and analysis. We have a full analysis of stuff that we don't even do here on the show, but it's over on Substack. So make sure and join and get in there. Of course, if you guys want to reach me, it is out there on Twitter at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.